Okay, we all want to live a great retired life, but eventually that's going to end unless you can find some way to be immortal. And being immortal, that may not be everything that's all cracked up to be, but it's something I could explore in another video. But anyway, you want to live a good life and you want to exit in a good way and not be a burden to your family in a variety of decisions that need to be made. And so I'm going to talk about those three things that you can help your family with. And this is something that you need to do now, because nobody knows when they're going to die. And if we did, we'd be able to make a lot better financial decisions. So the three things I'm going to talk about in this video is, and number one is a healthcare proxy. Number two, talk about avoiding probate. And number three, what do you want done with the body, with your body? So to begin with, is that prior to your death, you might be sick, and that's a possibility. And so what happens if you cannot make decisions for yourself? For example, is that, let's say that you've had a stroke and you cannot communicate or something, and for whatever reason. The thing is, if you are considered incompetent to make those decisions, which sometimes is along a scale of, of decision making, you need to appoint in advance a healthcare proxy. Now, this is all state driven. And what I mean by that is that states call it different things because politicians like to remain reelected, and so they tiptoe around issues like death, and nobody likes to talk about death. Well, I'm here to talk about death. So the thing is that a healthcare proxy is essentially designating someone else that you trust to make your healthcare decisions for you if you are unable to. Now, that might even mean to the point of withdrawing of treatment. And for example, let's say that you're unconscious and you're in a coma, and if you've designated somebody in advance to make those decisions, they can authorize the removal of life support for you. And when you do, of course, then you'll pass away. Now, the thing is that this healthcare proxy, depending on how the state calls it, is that it's only when you are incompetent. And for example, let's say that you're on a respirator keeping you alive, and you were in a coma, and then you woke up, and then but you still need that respirator, and so now you can make decisions and communicate. Does that mean that your spouse gets to pull the plug? No, it's only when you are incompetent. So designate that healthcare proxy to somebody you trust, and because that will be very helpful. Now, you've heard of these issues about something called a living will. Those are old type of approaches. They're relatively narrow. They're at least something, but Google healthcare proxy for your state, put your state name in there, and oftentimes the state will have forms that you can fill out. Even in your own healthcare situation could be helpful. So that's very helpful to have that in advance. It relieves an awful lot of burden from your relatives, and you get to have those discussions about what you want done in the event of the scenario. The second thing is that I want to talk about is that prior to your death, and it need not be on the day of your death, but well in advance, is that since you're retired, you've probably got more years behind you than you do in front of you. So what you want to do is to help, your survivors, is to help them avoid probate court as often as possible. Because, if you don't, you've heard about leaving a will. Well, a will is an instrument that is essentially a residual instrument. And that is that whatever else is left over, this is what you're supposed to do. Because with proper, it's called estate planning. With proper estate planning, you can avoid probate. Well, your relatives, your survivors, can avoid probate of having to go to court and asking a judge, can this be done with the property? Here's an example of avoiding probate, is that, you have your checking account or your savings account or your stock account, You can establish survivorship in there. Is that payable upon death? So once they present a death certificate, oftentimes it's simply the money is transferred into your account. You'd have to check, of course, but that's the high-level abstract idea, is to do a payable upon death, or it's sometimes called POB. And so you can set up your checking accounts. You can even look into your home. So the point is how can I avoid probate? And that's estate planning, and it comes with your assets by making them payable upon death or transferred upon death, so that you don't even have to go to court. So that's the second thing that you can do for your family members. And the third thing is that there's this idea of, well, what are you going to do with your body? Now, I can make a whole separate video of this because I've got a little bit of a twisted sense of humor. But the thing is that when you're dead, what are they going to do with the body? Well, one of them is you could certainly cremate. You could get cremated. That's a good idea. It's less costly compared to a casket, for example. A cremation, I support cremation. I've told my wife that's what I want. Just make sure I'm dead. That's the underlying requirement. Don't want to get a diamonds are forever in James Bond situation, which he goes into the crematory and he's not dead. So there's cremation. The other option, of course, is a casket. But the thing is that you want to plan those things in advance if you want to go that route, because those funeral homes, I'm not saying, a lot of them are just essentially unregulated, and you're at a vulnerable time. Not you, because you're dead, but your relatives are. And so it's important to have this pre-planning. And nobody wants to talk about death, but thinking about it this way is that, when does it rain? It rains when you forget your umbrella. So so by pre-planning, you avoid the rain, so to speak, and you don't need the umbrella. Now, there are other options that I can look at, that I will probably look at, is that of, a natural decomposition, not in your front yard or your backyard. That probably violates local regulations, I'm sure. But it's kind of a macabre kind of discussion, but who knows? But bottom line, those are the three things that you should do. You should enjoy your retired life, but eventually it's going to come to an end. And so you want to pre-plan, and you can pre-plan by, if you get sick and not able to make decisions for yourself, then you can appoint a healthcare proxy so they can. And you can discuss, those issues well in advance with that person that gets assigned that responsibility. It relieves an awful lot of guilt. Secondly, you can do is avoid probate court as often as possible for your survivors by simply figuring out ways easily, without having to hire an attorney, that already exist for, like, checking accounts, assets, like if you have a 401k, they have survivorship forms that you can fill out. And then third is, what do you want done with your body? You want it cremated? You want yourself cremated? Do you want yourself buried? Do you want to go through a funeral home? Funeral homes cremate, but if you go the casket route, that's just so expensive, and people are vulnerable. So if that's what you want, fine, but plan on that in advance so you don't get, taken advantage of. So live a good life, have a good death, and see you next time.